1973, and the most hated man in America walks into a press conference. They're screaming war criminal. His career should be over. But 3 months later, he wins the Nobel Peace Prize. It begs the question, who was Henry Kissinger really? A monster or the ultimate strategist? He didn't apologize, he didn't defend himself. He used a psychological weapon so calculated that it turned his accusers into spectators of their own irrelevance. And if you're watching this, someone just accused you of something, didn't they? Here's what happened 5 minutes ago, or yesterday, or last week. Someone attacked your character, called you selfish, questioned your integrity, said you failed. Why? And you felt it, that biological rage, that cognitive bias screaming at you to pull out receipts to prove you're a good person. You think you're defending yourself. You're not. You're surrendering. Because the moment you start explaining, you've already accepted they were right. Something Kissinger understood that you don't. And I'll show you exactly what it is. But first, you need to see where you're losing. Maybe it happened this morning. Maybe you're still replaying it in your head right now. Aren't you? The submission trap. When you defend yourself, you think you're clarifying. You're not. You're submitting to their court.
I am innocent of the charges against me.
Watch what happens. Accusation. You're arrogant. You've changed. Your defense. No, I'm just focused. I'm doing this for us. Congratulations. You just agreed they are the judge of your personality. You just validated their tribunal. You asked for a permission to evolve. This morning, someone said, you lied to me. You withheld information. You said, I didn't mean to. I just forgot to tell you because I was busy. You think you explained yourself. You didn't. You just agreed that you are a subordinate who owes them a full report. You're standing in a courtroom you never consented to enter. Kissinger wouldn't defend against withholding information.
Disengagement when they've completed their examination. We will then transmit those ideas.
He wouldn't stutter about being busy. He'd lean back and say, honesty without timing is just stupidity. I waited until the situation was handled to speak. Do you want to argue about transparency or do you want to enjoy the result? See how Kissinger thought? No apology, no excuses, just a brutal statement of priority. He didn't justify the silence. He made the need for transparency look naive. He recontextualized. That's the first layer of power, a level of power where self-defense doesn't exist. Not because you're innocent, but because you refuse to be judged by the laws of ordinary people. Kissinger operated at that level. This is the man who shook hands with Mao Zedong to open communist China, while everyone else was terrified to speak. And what he did when they called him a monster, it's so cold, so surgical, that when I show you the actual technique, you'll realize you've been playing a completely different game. But here's the problem. You can't just ignore accusations. That's weakness. So what do? This is where it gets dangerous for them. The dissolution of the court. Kissinger didn't win arguments. He couldn't care less. He dissolved the court itself. When the press cornered him about the secret bombings in Laos and Cambodia, when the heat of the Vietnam War was at its peak, he didn't talk about feelings. He didn't use standard emotional intelligence to empathize with reporters.
What is this? Is this the answers to my question?
He didn't grovel in the mud of morality. He ascended. You see this every day on social media. Someone, quote, tweets you. This take is idiotic and harmful. You defend back and write a 15-tweet thread explaining your credentials, your intentions, how you've been misunderstood. Congratulations. You just wrote their prosecution's opening statement. Instead, a Kissinger tweet sounds like interesting interpretation. The broader discourse on this topic would benefit from engaging with the systemic factors outlined in this, links to 40-page policy paper. You didn't defend yourself. You elevated the argument into a space where their emotional attack looks childish. They're screaming. You're citing sources. The crowd doesn't see a debate. They see an academic calmly handling a heckler. That's the same thing Kissinger did with the press. When reporters asked Mr. Secretary of State, how do you justify the civilian deaths? Kissinger responded with, The North Vietnamese sanctuaries in Cambodia were staging areas for attacks that claimed American lives. The operations were designed to shorten the war and reduce overall casualties by eliminating the logistical infrastructure sustaining Hanoi's southern operations. See? The pattern repeats. The reporter asked a personal question. How can you justify deaths? Kissinger gave a systemic answer. Logistical infrastructure, sanctuaries, strategic calculus.
Cannot receive reinforcements, replacements.
You're playing checkers. I'm good versus I'm bad. He's playing geopolitics, so order versus chaos. This is called intellectual distance. This is the specific brand of diplomacy Henry Kissinger used to dominate the world stage. And there's a specific formula to it. 3 language patterns you replace, 1 tone you adopt, and a psychological trap you set. But if you use it wrong, it backfires spectacularly. Let me show you how it works. Because here's where most people fail. They try to copy this and it sounds fake. There's a missing ingredient Kissinger used that turns this from a party trick into a weapon of state. The secret ingredient is constructive ambiguity. You've been taught clarity is power. Be direct, say what you mean. Bullshit. Clarity makes you an easy target. If you're a solid wall, they can hammer you. If you're fog, the hammer passes right through. It's a hack in the philosophy of mind. If you change the label, you change the reality. Here's the actual mechanism Kissinger used in 1971 during the India-Pakistan War. The press accused him of supporting a genocidal regime. Pakistan was slaughtering Bengali civilians. The evidence was overwhelming. When reporters asked Kissinger, how can you support Pakistan when they're committing atrocities? He responded, the subcontinent's stability depends on a balance of power that prevents Soviet encirclement of the Indian Ocean. Our relationship with Islamabad serves broader strategic interests in containing Moscow's southern expansion while maintaining credible deterrence in South Asia. The reporter asked a moral question. How can you justify mass murder? Kissinger gave a systems answer. He didn't deny the genocide. He made the accusation irrelevant by operating at a different altitude. You're talking about bodies. He's talking about empires. The accusation evaporated, not because he was innocent, but because he made caring about morality look naive. That's recontextualization. Now watch this same pattern in your life. Accusation. You never listen. You only think about yourself. Defensive you. Of course I listen. Yesterday I asked how you were. You just confessed. You admitted the trial is real. Thinking like Kissinger, you respond with, I hear you saying we're not connecting the way you need. What does listening look like to you? What just happened? You didn't accept selfish as the premise. You didn't defend yourself. You reframed an accusation into a negotiation. They wanted a trial. You offered a diplomatic summit. They can't keep screaming, you're selfish, at someone who just asked, what do you actually need? The accusation has nowhere to land. Now imagine this. Your mom phones in and says, you never call anymore, you don't care about this family. A defensive you snaps back with, that's not true. I called last Tuesday, and now you're begging for acquittal in the court of mom. A Kissinger mindset reframes the accusation. Hey mom, I know we talk less than you'd like. What would feel right to you? Once a week? Twice? You didn't argue about whether you care.
It was absolutely consistent with our policy that we would resist that.
You acknowledged the gap without admitting guilt. You offered a solution instead of a defense. The anger has nowhere to go. This is called intellectual distance. But here's the trap. If your voice shakes even slightly, you're finished. Intellectual distance only works if you actually believe systems matter more than feelings. There's one more layer to this, the philosophy that makes the technique authentic. Because technique without belief is just theater. And people can smell theater. What Kissinger had underneath this, it's cold. But it's the only thing that makes it real. The philosophy of order. Kissinger's doctoral dissertation was 400 pages on diplomacy and the history of Europe. His conclusion? One cold truth, order is the precondition of justice. Translation, order first, justice later, maybe. In 1973, when Congress was tearing him apart over Cambodia, when protesters wanted him tried and hung for war crimes, Kissinger didn't defend his moral character. Instead, he testified, "The issue is not whether the policy was popular. The issue is whether it prevented a wider war and maintained the credibility of American commitments globally."
Recent experience has shown that the need for rapid response and the ambiguity of many situations.
Do you understand what he did? What Congress really asked him was, "Are you a good person who made a mistake?" And Kissinger answered, "Does the global order remain stable?" He didn't care if you thought he was evil. He cared if the system collapsed. Order doesn't care about your feelings. This isn't a moral framework. It's a power framework. Okay, now picture this. Right at the end of your shift, your boss calls you into the office. This project is a disaster. You failed. Your stomach drops. Your first instinct seeks defense, and you say, "I didn't have time. Mike didn't send the data. The client changed requirements." You're seeking justice. You want your boss to understand you're not a bad employee. The correct Kissinger response is, "Pushing the deliverable would have destabilized the account. I prioritized relationship preservation over the deadline. It was strategic triage. Miss the date or risk losing the client entirely." See the difference? You didn't apologize. You didn't deny the failure. You reframed it as protecting a larger order, the client relationship. You're not seeking your boss's moral approval. You're demonstrating you see systems he doesn't see. Victims seek justice. "It wasn't my fault. Strategists maintain order. Here's what I protected." And remember, victims don't get promoted. And here's the darkest part, the piece that makes this actually work. The part about guilt that Kissinger weaponized. Because if you feel guilty, none of this works. And guilt is exactly what they want you to feel. So Kissinger eliminated it entirely.
The United States is seeking a peace that heals.
The elimination of guilt. When the war ended in 1975 with the fall of Saigon, helicopters evacuating from rooftops and thousands abandoned, the press didn't want an apology. They wanted Kissinger to admit that peace with honor was a lie. They wanted him to confess that 58,000 Americans had died for absolutely nothing. During a TV interview, the host asked Kissinger if he felt guilty for the lives lost in Vietnam. Kissinger's response? "I feel responsibility for the decisions made under the constraints we faced. Guilt is a personal emotion. Responsibility is a historical assessment."
Caused by a minority, contributed substantially to the demoralization of what you consider the American establishment.
He reframed guilt as beneath him. While everyone else was stuck debating morality, good and evil, and shameful defeat, Kissinger was already negotiating SALT II with Brezhnev. He wrote in his memoirs not an apology, but a historical record. The Cambodian operation achieved its tactical objective of disrupting North Vietnamese logistics. Whether the long-term political costs were justified remains a question for historians to assess, with the benefit of hindsight unavailable to policymakers operating under wartime exigencies. Translation: yes, it happened. It was necessary given what I knew. History will judge. I've already moved on. No emotion, no guilt, no defense. Of course, you're not negotiating with Hanoi, but you are negotiating with someone right now, aren't you? Imagine your phone buzzes right now. You look down. It's your ex. The message reads, "You hurt me. It's all your fault. I deserve an apology." They want you to grovel, to confess you're defective. You immediately scramble to explain, "I'm sorry, I was going through stuff. I didn't mean to. I'm a terrible person." You just handed them a weapon they'll use for months. Stop. Assess. The statesman in you responds, "That relationship didn't work for either of us. I've learned what I need going forward. I hope you find what you're looking for." What just happened? You acknowledged the outcome without accepting moral guilt. You moved forward instead of begging for forgiveness. Guilt looks backward and paralyzes. Responsibility looks forward and builds. And how about this? Your boss sends you a one-on-one request. As soon as you walk in, he calls you out. "You failed the team and missed the revenue goals. My supervisor is questioning whether you belong here." Your defensive mode activates. You need to protect your job. "I'm so sorry. I'll work harder. I'll fix it. Please give me a chance. You're drowning in guilt. Breathe. Think like Kissinger. Here is the calculated response. That outcome revealed structural gaps in our process. I've documented what broke and redesigned the workflow for next quarter. The failure was informational. You turned guilt into data. Remember, guilt paralyzes, responsibility builds, and that brings us to the mission, what you're going to do the next time this happens.
And we hope that this will lead to a negotiation between...
But there's one warning first, because if you misuse this, you won't gain power. You'll expose yourself as a fraud. The mission. It's 1973 and the Watergate investigation hits critical mass. The president is exposed running a criminal conspiracy. The American government is imploding from the inside out. The Washington Post has the White House in a chokehold. Every day, a new leak. Every headline, another casualty. Richard Nixon, the most powerful man in the world, is drowning. And he does what drowning men do. He grabs the person closest to him and tries to pull them under. He turns on Kissinger, publicly. The president blames him for the chaos. The press smells blood. The head of the man they've been hunting for years is finally within reach. Everyone expects Kissinger to defend himself, to leak counter documents, to beg Nixon for mercy and protection. He doesn't. He calls a press conference, not to apologize, not to explain. He says, I do not believe it is possible to conduct the foreign policy of the United States
Under these circumstances, when the character and credibility of the Secretary of State is at issue, and if it is not cleared up, I will resign.
See what he did? He didn't defend his character. He didn't argue about fairness. He didn't even mention Nixon. He threatened to collapse American foreign policy if they kept questioning him. He turned a personal attack into a national security crisis. Nixon backed down within 48 hours. Less than a year later, Nixon was gone and Kissinger was still the Secretary of State. Now here's how you use this in real life. Let's say you're a site foreman. Your crew is behind schedule. The general contractor storms onto the job site in front of your guys. This is a mess. You're 3 days behind and I'm losing money every hour. What the hell are you doing? Your crew's watching. Are you going to let him talk to you like that? Your ego screams for protection, so you say, hey, it's not my fault. The supplier was late. The rebar delivery got delayed. The weather, blah, blah, blah. You sound like you're making excuses as you go. You're defending yourself like someone who screwed up. Stop. Kill the excuses. Apply the Kissinger frame, no hesitation, and deliver the strategic ultimatum. If you don't trust my site management, pull me off the job right now and bring someone else in, but I need full authority to execute, or this doesn't work. Your call. Okay, what just happened? You forced your boss to either back you completely or fire you in front of your crew. You made it his problem, not yours. And here is the key. You have to be okay with being fired. You are burning bridges. Without leverage, it turns into posturing. Here's the warning. This only works if you're willing to walk the talk. Kissinger wasn't bluffing when he threatened to resign. He meant it. That's why Nixon folded. If you're scared, they'll smell it. If you're performing, they'll see through it. If you still need their approval, you've already lost. You need a total frame shift. You are not a person. You are a nation state. A nation doesn't have hurt feelings. A nation has interests. A nation doesn't defend itself from insults. A nation recalibrates strategy. It is the coldest discipline there is. Tonight, tomorrow, next week, when someone attacks you, don't react emotionally. Stop. Think like Kissinger. Reframe. Recontextualize. Apply intellectual distance. Elevate from personal to systemic. Use constructive ambiguity. Change the label, change the reality, seek order, not justice. Protect the structure, not your ego. Eliminate guilt, acknowledge outcomes, extract lessons, move forward. And here's what happens. They expect you to crumble, to defend, to explain. And when it happens, instead of letting panic take the wheel, instead of blurting out whatever your ego screams for protection, remember how Henry Kissinger wielded power. You don't engage with the accusation. You escalate past it. You make them realize that attacking you has consequences they didn't calculate. And in that moment, when they see you won't flinch, won't beg, won't break, the power shifts. Not because you won the argument, but because you refused to have it. In 1973, Kissinger walked into that press conference a war criminal. he walked out a statesman. Not because he changed, because he refused to play their game.
The question is,
will you? We don't teach tactics. We teach operating systems. This is for people who don't let others set the terms. Americology isn't about the past. It's about your future. We analyze the titans who built this country, not to judge them, but to steal their playbook. So the next time life tries to push you around, you have the tools to push back. Don't just survive the chaos, master it. Subscribe to Americology.